Hi there, Chris from TotallyEV, and here I'm doing a dedicated audio review of the BMW iX1. If you want a detailed review of the vehicle itself, do check it out on your pop-up banner, down the description below, or indeed in the pinned comments. Now it's worth considering over here that the iX1 and the X1 share the same sort of platform, and in this respect the audio system can go across both vehicles, so in case you're considering one or the other, definitely do stay tuned. Now as standard, you have got a 6-speaker setup, that's across the entire trim range, and here you've got a mid-range driver found within each of the 4 doors and a central bass speaker found underneath the front 2 seats. If however you splash out an additional £660, you'll get the 12-speaker Harman Kardon audio system. Here you've got a mid-range and tweeter drivers found within each of the 4 doors, a mid-range and a tweeter found within the central speaker, and the central bass speakers found under the front 2 seats. Indeed, over here you're doubling the tally. Now, as you might have noticed, there is no subwoofer and there are no dedicated woofer drivers. I'll be touching upon how this is important further down in this video. Now furthermore, if you're looking at customizing the audio drivers to your own heart's content, you might want to navigate on the infotainment system. And here it's unfortunate that you do not have dedicated mid and high range controls, like you'd find for example on the BMW iX3 or like some of its competitors. Indeed, over here you've only got treble and bass. In this respect, I've added 2 notches to treble and taken 1 notch off bass. You might have also noticed that I've disabled the enhanced sound. Now this does have a positive effect in terms of the overall soundstage, but does take away from the accuracy. I'll be touching upon this further down in this video as well, specifically in the soundstage department. Now for you to connect up to the infotainment system, you've got Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which are supported over a wired and wireless transmission, which is great to see. If however you want to resort to Bluetooth, then the SBC and AAC codecs are supported only. So moving swiftly on, let's talk about cabin noise, and here the objective numbers will be on your screen. Indeed, for those people who have been subscribed to the channel will know that the actual measurements are actually quite low, and therefore if you compare it to some of its competitors, it is actually class leading in this department. In fact, subjectively I'll say that there's very little road noise when traversing at lower speeds, and very low wind noise deflecting off the A-pillars or the wing mirrors when traversing on the motorway. Now the only thing I don't like, however, is the iconic sounds. These are effectively fake whooshing sounds that can be heard within the cabin. Thankfully, these can be permanently disabled via the infotainment system. Now with all of that in mind, let's get onto an audio demo. I'll be placing the camera and microphone in 4 separate locations and playing back a track. It's from Priya J and it's titled Like Me. Now I appreciate an audio demo over YouTube is never ideal, so let me get onto my own subjective opinion. Now first off, in terms of the overall sub-bass extension, it is there, but it just feels a little bit cut short. See here, if you compare it to some other audio systems that have a dedicated subwoofer, for example even the likes of the Kia Soul EV Harman Kardon audio system, it really can't quite compete. The same sort of comments were said about the BMW iX3 Harman Kardon audio system because it does also emit a subwoofer, which does feel a little bit baffling. However, the flip side is that the overall mid-bass impact is done to perfection. The central bass speakers positioned underneath the front 2 seats do a tremendous job, both in terms of the overall quantity and quality. Now I appreciate the overall quantity is pretty much subjective, and in my case I actually reduced 1 notch from the bass EQ. This was purely done in order for me to kind of counteract the overall bass impact and therefore prevent it leaking into the mid-range too much. Speaking of which, over here, the overall mids just feels a bit too subdued. Now don't get me wrong, it's not too bad in the grander scheme of things. However, if I'm comparing it to some of the higher quality audio systems, for example the Tesla Model Y, it really doesn't stand a chance. Both female and male vocals just feels a bit too pushed back. Now as for the highs, however, they do extend very well. Both at the front and rear of the cabin you've got those dedicated tweeters, and therefore you get that sort of toe tapping feeling. You might want to add a few notches in terms of the treble EQ in order to get a little bit more of that extra lively sound. So finally we get onto its soundstage, and here it's a little bit of a hit and miss. Now first off, in terms of its overall instrument separation, I've got no complaints whatsoever, purely because you've got the dedicated mid-range and tweeters, which are positioned at the front and rear of the cabin. It means that everyone's going to be kept pretty excited when it comes to hearing different instruments coming from left and right. However, the overall width and depth is a bit tricky, because if you were having the enhanced sound profile enabled by the infotainment system, you'll find that the overall width and depth is decent, but on the flip side you get this sort of odd reverb or a little fishbowl effect as such, and therefore means that it does take away from what you might expect from the artist. So if you're comparing it, for example, with a set of bookshelf speakers at home or a hi-fi system or a set of good earphones or headphones, you'll know that your artist's voice and the overall sound that's coming out from the iX1 with the enhanced sound profile just sounds a bit off. Now, as a result of that, I actually had to disable the enhanced sound, and therefore meant that I had the overall width and depth feeling a little bit closed. Indeed, it felt a little bit more unidirectional coming from the front of the cabin. So very much depends as to what you're looking for from your audio system, but here as I'm analysing it and comparing and contrasting to some of its competitors, I have to say that I actually had to disable the enhanced sound profile and just accept that it had a somewhat unidirectional sound. Now ultimately what I'm trying to say over here is that the audio system that's comprised within the BMW iX1 is decent, and certainly if you were to upgrade it to the Harman Kardon audio system, certainly does perform very well across the sound frequency range, albeit not exactly perfect. As a result, it gets a performance award. Now it's worth considering that if you are looking at some of its competitors, for example the Tesla Model Y, or indeed for example the Audi Q4 e-tron, among a few others, then some of these other vehicles out there will actually provide a better audio system, some of which I've actually reviewed and will be down in the description below for your own consideration. Now if you've liked this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.